You need to hear this. You stumbled upon this video because of this. Something inside you is tired. Not the kind of tired that disappears after a good night of sleep. Not the kind that comes from working too much or staying up too late. This is a deeper kind of exhaustion. The kind that lives in your chest. The kind that follows you into every room, every conversation, every quiet moment when there is finally nothing left to distract you from yourself. You have been carrying too much for too long. You have been carrying emotions you never fully processed, expectations you never chose, responsibilities that were never supposed to belong to you. You have been carrying the pressure to hold everything together while something inside you has been slowly falling apart. And maybe nobody knows. Maybe you became so good at hiding your pain that even the people closest to you have no idea how much you are struggling. You learned how to smile when you feel empty. How to say I'm fine when your mind is racing and your heart feels unbearably heavy. You learned how to keep showing up for everyone else while quietly disappearing from yourself. The truth is, most people do not notice when someone is suffering if that person still looks functional. So you keep going. You answer the messages. You go to work. You make plans. You laugh at the right moments. You do everything you are supposed to do. And still there is this strange feeling inside you that you cannot explain. This feeling that no matter how much you do, no matter how hard you try, no matter how much you give, something still feels missing. You feel disconnected from other people, from your life, from yourself. And perhaps the hardest part is that you do not even know exactly when it started. Maybe it began the day you realized you had to become strong too early. The day you learned that your feelings were too much. The day you understood that if you wanted love, acceptance, or safety, you would have to earn it. There is a reason why you became the person who overthinks everything. There is a reason why you try to control every outcome, replay every conversation, prepare for every possible disappointment. There is a reason why your mind never seems to rest. What you are feeling is not random. Most people do not realize that anxiety is often the mind's attempt to create safety in a world that once felt unsafe. Your mind learned to stay alert because some part of you believed that if you could just think enough, prepare enough, worry enough, maybe you could stop yourself from getting hurt. But instead of protecting you, it has been exhausting you. Because you were never meant to carry the weight of everything. You were never meant to control what other people think of you. Whether someone stays, whether life unfolds exactly the way you hoped, whether the future gives you certainty. And yet, somewhere along the way, you began to believe that your survival depended on it. So now you live with this invisible pressure inside you. The pressure to say the right thing, to make the right choice, to avoid mistakes, to prevent loss, to keep everyone happy, to never let yourself fall apart. You have become a prison for yourself without even realizing it. The truth is, you are not only tired because life has been difficult. You are tired because you have been fighting battles that were never yours to fight. You have been fighting reality. You have been fighting the past, wishing it had happened differently. You have been fighting the future, trying to predict what has not happened yet. You have been fighting yourself, judging every emotion, every weakness, every wound as if your pain is something you should have already outgrown. But what if you do not need to become someone else in order to heal? What if the reason you feel so lost is not because you are broken, but because you have spent so much of your life abandoning yourself? There is a reason why this video found you now. Not because your life is falling apart, but because some deeper part of you can no longer keep living the same way. Some part of you is tired of surviving, tired of carrying, tired of pretending, tired of searching outside yourself for the peace that can only be found within. Maybe you stumbled upon these words because your soul is trying to show you something. Maybe the anxiety is not here to destroy you. Maybe it is here to reveal the places where you have been disconnected from yourself. Maybe the loneliness is not proof that you are unlovable. Maybe it is the pain of living too far away from your own truth. Maybe the exhaustion is not weakness. Maybe it is what happens when you spend years trying to become who everyone else needed you to be. You do not need another distraction. You do not need another temporary escape. You do not need someone to tell you to stay positive, think differently, or just stop worrying. You need something much deeper than that. You need to understand why you feel the way you do. You need to see that there is nothing wrong with your sensitivity, your depth, your emotions, or the part of you that has always felt different. You need to hear the truth that nobody ever told you. You are not broken. You have simply been trying to heal in a world that taught you to betray yourself. And the moment you stop fighting yourself, something inside you begins to change. The strange feeling that this was meant for you. You have felt it before. That strange, unsettling feeling that something is trying to reach you. A sentence appears at the exact moment you need it. A song says what you have been unable to admit to yourself. A conversation, a memory, a video like this one finds you on the one day when you can no longer keep carrying everything the same way. And part of you tries to dismiss it. You tell yourself it is just a coincidence, that you are overthinking, that it does not mean anything. But the truth is, there is a reason why certain things enter your life when you are no longer able to ignore what is happening inside you. Because something inside you has been asking for help for a long time. Not loudly. Not in a way that other people could see. It has been showing up in the quiet moments, in the heaviness you feel when you wake up, in the exhaustion that follows you even when you have done nothing, in the strange loneliness that appears in the middle of a crowded room, in the way you keep saying "I'm okay," while secretly wondering how much longer you can keep pretending. Most people do not realize how painful it is to feel everything so deeply while living in a world that tells you to hide it. You learned very early that there were parts of yourself that made other people uncomfortable. Your sadness was too much. Your sensitivity was too much. Your questions, your intensity, your need for deeper connection, the way you noticed things no one else seemed to notice. Somewhere along the way, you began to believe that in order to be accepted, you had to make yourself smaller. So you did. You became easier to understand, easier to manage. You learned to laugh when you wanted to cry. You learned to stay quiet when something hurt you. You learned to read the room, take care of everyone else, anticipate what people needed, and ignore the silent ache inside yourself. The truth is, when you spend years abandoning yourself in order to belong, eventually you stop recognizing who you are. And that is where the emptiness comes from. Not because there is something missing inside you, but because you have been taught to live disconnected from the deepest parts of yourself. There is a reason why you feel different, because you have always sensed that there is more to life than what other people seem willing to accept. More than pretending, more than surviving, more than constantly chasing approval while feeling empty inside. You were never meant to live only on the surface. You were never meant to silence your intuition, suppress your emotions, and spend your life trying to become who everyone else wanted you to be. That is why the old ways no longer work. That is why you can no longer distract yourself the way you used to. Why the noise, the busyness, the constant pressure to keep going have started to feel unbearable. Your soul is no longer willing to cooperate with the version of you that was built from fear. What you are feeling is not random. It is not weakness. It is not failure. It is the moment when the false version of you begins to crack, and that can feel terrifying, because before something true is born, something false has to fall apart. Most people spend their entire lives running from this moment. They numb themselves, distract themselves, convince themselves that if they just keep going, if they just stay busy enough, they will not have to face what they really feel. But you are here because some deeper part of you is ready. Ready to stop pretending. Ready to stop carrying the weight of who you had to become. Ready to ask the question that changes everything. If I am not who I have been pretending to be, then who am I really? That question is the beginning of everything, because the moment you begin to see that your pain is not the problem, you also begin to see that the life you have been living may not be the real prison. The real prison is something much deeper, much more invisible, and most people never even realize they are trapped inside it. The real reason you feel so trapped. The prison was never your emotions. It was never your sensitivity, your overthinking, your fear, or the fact that you feel things more deeply than other people seem to. The real prison is the belief that you can only feel at peace when everything around you finally becomes safe, certain, and under control. Most people do not realize they are living this way. They spend their lives waiting waiting for the right person to choose them, waiting for the future to make sense, waiting to feel better, calmer, more worthy, more secure. They tell themselves that once this problem is solved, once this person changes, once they know what is going to happen, then they will finally be able to breathe. But that moment never comes, because life keeps changing. People disappoint you. Plans fall apart. Someone leaves. Something ends. The future remains uncertain no matter how many times you try to predict it. And so you stay trapped inside a cycle that never ends. You think more. You worry more. You try harder. You replay conversations. Imagine every possible outcome. Search for signs. Prepare for disasters that have not happened. Because deep down, you believe that if you can just figure everything out, you will finally feel safe. The truth is, there is a reason why this never works. You are asking yourself to do something no human being was ever meant to do. You are trying to control things that have never belonged to you. Other people's feelings, other people's choices, the timing of your life, whether someone stays, whether someone understands you, whether the future unfolds the way you hoped. You carry all of it inside you as if it is your responsibility, as if your job is to hold the entire world together with your thoughts. And when you cannot, you blame yourself. You call yourself anxious, broken, too emotional, too weak. But you are not weak. You are exhausted from carrying a burden that was never yours. Most people do not realize that anxiety often begins in the moment we confuse responsibility with control. You are responsible for your choices, your honesty, your actions, your boundaries, the way you care for yourself. But you are not responsible for whether someone loves you the way you need. You are not responsible for making everyone understand you. You are not responsible for preventing loss, avoiding rejection, or forcing life to happen on your timeline. Still, you keep trying, because there is a wounded part of you that believes if you let go, everything will fall apart. There is a reason why. Maybe you learned very early that the world was unpredictable. Maybe you had to become the responsible one, the strong one, the one who noticed everything and held everything together. Maybe controlling became your way of surviving, but survival is not the same thing as peace. The truth is, when you spend your life trying to control what you cannot, you lose connection with the only place where your real power exists, inside yourself. Because while you are busy chasing certainty outside of you, you stop listening to what is happening within you. You stop asking yourself what you need. You stop noticing what you feel. You stop trusting your own truth because you are too busy trying to manage everyone else's. And little by little, you become trapped in a life that looks normal from the outside but feels unbearable on the inside. You wake up tired. You go to sleep with your mind racing. You carry a constant pressure in your chest, a feeling that something bad is about to happen, even when nothing is wrong. You call it anxiety. But beneath the anxiety is something even deeper. A war. A war between reality and the version of reality you keep trying to force. You want people to stay who are leaving. You want certainty where life only offers mystery. You want answers before it is time. You want the pain to go away without having to feel it. And every time life refuses to obey, you suffer. Not because you are broken, but because you are fighting a battle that no one can ever win. The truth is, your suffering is not coming only from what happened to you. It is coming from the war inside you between what is and what you wish reality would be. And until you see that, you will keep believing that the problem is your emotions. But your emotions are not the enemy. They are only showing you where you have been trying to hold on to what was never yours to carry. And if you are willing to see that, something uncomfortable begins to appear. Because you may realize that you have become attached to the very chaos that is hurting you. The invisible addiction to emotional chaos. There is something difficult to admit about pain. Sometimes, even when it is destroying you, it still feels familiar. And what feels familiar often feels safer than what is unknown. Most people do not realize this. They believe they want peace. They believe they want freedom. But when life becomes quiet, when there is nothing to worry about, nothing to chase, nothing to fix, they begin to feel uncomfortable. Not because something is wrong, because chaos has become home. You may have spent so many years living in survival mode that your mind no longer knows how to exist without tension. You became used to waiting for the next problem, the next disappointment, the next sign that something is about to go wrong. So when nothing is wrong, you search for something. You read into a message. You replay a conversation. You imagine worst-case scenarios. You create problems in your mind before life has even had the chance to happen, and then you wonder why you cannot relax. The truth is, there is a reason why your mind does this. If you grew up in an environment where love was unpredictable, where you had to earn attention, avoid conflict, stay alert, or constantly read other people's emotions to feel safe, then your nervous system learned that peace is dangerous. Because in your experience, the moments of calm never lasted. Something always happened. Someone changed. Someone left. Something fell apart. So now, without even realizing it, you stay emotionally prepared for pain because part of you believes that if you expect the worst, it will hurt less when it comes. But it never does. It only means you suffer twice. Once in your mind, and once in reality, if it even happens at all. Most people do not realize that overthinking is not really about thinking. It is about trying to create the illusion of control. You think that if you analyze everything deeply enough, you will find the answer that finally makes you feel safe. But there is no answer. Because the thing you are searching for is not certainty. It is trust. And trust cannot be found in your thoughts. That is why no amount of overthinking ever brings relief. For a moment, it feels like you are doing something, solving something, protecting yourself. But then the anxiety comes back, stronger, because every time you obey the voice of fear, you teach your mind that fear must be important. And so the cycle continues. You become addicted to checking, analyzing, anticipating, preparing. Not because you want to suffer, because a part of you believes that staying anxious is the only way to stay safe. There is a reason why letting go feels so frightening, because if you stop worrying, if you stop controlling, if you stop carrying everything on your shoulders, you may have to face something deeper. You may have to face the emptiness underneath the chaos, the loneliness, the grief, the old wounds you have been running from by staying mentally busy. The truth is, sometimes the mind creates noise because silence would force you to feel what has been buried for years. And buried pain does not disappear. It waits. It waits in the body, in the chest that always feels tight, in the stomach that never relaxes, in the exhaustion you carry even when nothing is physically wrong. You think you are tired because life is hard, but part of you is tired because you have been fighting yourself every day. You have been trying to outrun emotions that only wanted to be heard. You have been trying to escape discomfort without realizing that the discomfort is carrying a message. You are not addicted to pain because you are weak. You became attached to chaos because chaos was the only thing that ever felt familiar. But familiar does not mean true. And familiar does not mean you are meant to live this way forever. There is another way to live. A way that is not built on fear, control, and emotional survival. But before you can find it, you have to understand something that changes everything. Your mind cannot protect you from a future that does not exist. Why your mind cannot save you from what has not happened. Your mind has been working overtime for so long that you no longer even notice it. The moment you wake up, it begins. What if something goes wrong? What if they leave? What if you make the wrong decision? What if you fail? What if the future becomes exactly what you fear? You call it thinking. But the truth is, most of the time, it is fear wearing the mask of intelligence. Because when you are afraid, the mind does something strange. It convinces you that if you think hard enough, long enough, deeply enough, you will eventually find the one answer that protects you from pain. So you keep going. You replay every conversation until you no longer know what was real and what was imagined. You search for hidden meanings in people's words, pauses, expressions. You create entire futures in your head and then suffer as if they have already happened. Most people do not realize that the mind is not trying to tell the future. It is trying to prevent you from being hurt again. There is a reason why your thoughts become louder when you care deeply. The more important something is to you, the more desperately your mind tries to control it. Love, rejection, abandonment, failure, loss. The mind believes that if it can predict what is coming, it can protect you from the shock of pain. But it cannot. Because no amount of preparation can stop life from being uncertain, and no amount of overthinking can save you from an experience that has not happened. The truth is, your mind has been asking itself a question that has no answer. How can I guarantee that nothing painful will ever happen to me again? You cannot. No one can. You cannot guarantee that people will stay. You cannot guarantee that you will never be disappointed. You cannot guarantee that the future will unfold exactly the way you hope. And perhaps that is the most terrifying thing of all. Because if you cannot control what happens, then what are you supposed to hold on to? This is where most people become trapped. They spend years trying to solve uncertainty instead of learning how to live with it. They believe peace will come after they have enough answers. But peace does not come from having all the answers. It comes from no longer needing them in order to trust yourself. There is a reason why your mind never feels satisfied. Because you are trying to use thought to solve something that can only be healed through trust. Trust that even if something painful happens, you will survive it. Trust that even if someone leaves, you will not lose yourself. Trust that even if the future is unclear, you do not need to know everything in order to take the next step. Most people do not realize that the mind was never designed to carry the weight of the unknown. The mind is useful for making decisions, solving problems, learning, creating. But when you ask it to control life, it becomes overwhelmed. It turns against you. It creates endless loops, endless scenarios, endless fear. Not because there is something wrong with you, because you are asking your mind to do the impossible. You are asking it to create certainty in a world that was never meant to be certain. And the more you ask, the more exhausted you become. There is a moment in healing when you begin to see this clearly. You realize that you have spent years standing guard at the door of a future that never arrived. You have spent years trying to protect yourself from pain by living as if pain is always coming. You have not been living. You have been rehearsing loss, rehearsing rejection, rehearsing failure. And while you were busy preparing for life, life was passing by. The truth is, what hurts you is not only what might happen, it is what your fear is making you live through every single day. Because every imagined future becomes another prison. Every worst-case scenario becomes another weight. Every attempt to control the unknown takes you further away from the only place where your power actually exists. Not in tomorrow, not in other people, not in certainty. Inside you. And the moment you stop asking your mind to control the future, you begin to ask a different question. What in my life actually belongs to me? The moment you learn what actually belongs to you. There comes a moment when you become so exhausted that you can no longer keep carrying everything. You can no longer carry other people's choices, other people's moods, other people's confusion. You can no longer carry the pressure to make everyone understand you, love you, stay, choose you, approve of you. Something inside you begins to break, but this time, it is not the kind of breaking that destroys you. It is the kind that reveals the truth. The truth is, you have been carrying things that never belonged to you. You have been carrying the weight of outcomes, the weight of timing, the weight of whether someone changes, the weight of whether life unfolds exactly the way you hoped. You have been carrying all of this as if it were your responsibility. And because of that, you have forgotten something essential. You have forgotten what actually belongs to you. Most people spend their entire lives trying to control what is outside of them because they have never been taught where their real power lives. Your real power does not live in other people's reactions. It does not live in whether someone texts back, whether someone stays, whether someone understands the depth of what you feel. It does not live in the past becoming different or the future becoming certain. Your power lives in something much quieter. It lives in the way you choose to meet this moment. It lives in your response, your honesty, your values, your boundaries, your willingness to stay true to yourself, even when life does not go the way you wanted. There is a reason why you have felt so powerless. Because you have been trying to find power in places where it does not exist. You looked for it in being chosen, in being understood, in making sure everything worked out. But the moment your peace depends on something outside of you, your life becomes fragile. Because now your entire emotional world depends on things you cannot control. The truth is, there are things in this life that will never belong to you. You cannot control who someone becomes. You cannot control whether people see your worth. You cannot control when something ends, when something begins, or whether someone gives you the love you deserve. You cannot control the past. You cannot control whether life brings uncertainty, change, disappointment, loss. And if you keep trying, you will lose yourself. But there are things that do belong to you. You can choose whether you abandon yourself or stand by yourself. You can choose whether you betray your truth to keep someone else comfortable. You can choose whether you let pain make you smaller or let it make you more honest. You can choose what you give your energy to. You can choose the meaning you create from what happened to you. You can choose who you become. Most people do not realize how freeing this is at first, because they hear the words "let go," and they think it means giving up. But letting go is not giving up. It is no longer trying to carry what was never yours. It is setting down the impossible burden of controlling life. It is realizing that your job was never to make everything work. Your job is to remain true to yourself while life unfolds. There is something inside you that life cannot touch. A place beyond the chaos, beyond the fear, beyond the uncertainty. A place that still belongs to you, even when everything else changes. And maybe that is what you have been searching for all along. Not certainty, not control, not a guarantee that nothing painful will ever happen. Maybe what you have been searching for is the part of yourself that remains, even when life does not go the way you hoped. Because when you stop trying to control everything outside of you, you begin to discover something you never knew was there. A quiet strength, a deeper self, a kind of peace that does not depend on the world behaving the way you want it to. But before you can live from that place, there is something you must allow yourself to do. You must grieve. You must grieve everything you have been trying so hard to hold together. The grief of letting go. No one tells you that healing begins with grief. They tell you to move on, to stay positive, to be strong, to stop thinking about it, to accept what happened and keep going. But the truth is, there are some things you cannot simply move on from. You have to grieve them. You have to grieve the love you wanted and never received, the version of your life you imagined, the future you were certain would happen, the person you hoped someone would become, the years you spent waiting for something that was never going to arrive. Most people do not realize that one of the deepest forms of grief is not losing what you had. It is losing what you hoped for. Because hope is powerful. Hope keeps you holding on long after something has stopped being real. It keeps you believing that maybe if you try harder, love harder, wait longer, explain yourself better, sacrifice more of yourself, things will change. So you keep carrying it. You carry relationships that are already over. You carry people who no longer know how to love you. You carry dreams that no longer belong to who you are becoming. And all the while, something inside you grows heavier. Not because you are weak, because you were never meant to carry what has already ended. There is a reason why letting go feels unbearable at first, because you are not only releasing the thing itself, you are releasing the identity you built around it, the identity of being the one who holds everything together, the one who waits, the one who fixes, the one who never gives up, the one who believes that if they just love enough, they can make someone stay. And when you let go, that version of you begins to fall apart too. That is why grief can feel so confusing. You think you are only mourning a person, a dream, a future, but you are also mourning the self you became in order to survive it. The self who kept hoping. The self who kept chasing. The self who believed that their worth depended on being needed, chosen, or understood. The truth is, there are some burdens that feel sacred simply because you have carried them for so long. You become attached to the struggle, attached to the waiting, attached to the idea that if you let go, then all the pain you lived through meant nothing. But it did mean something. It made you aware. It showed you where you were abandoning yourself. It revealed how much of your life has been built around trying to earn what should have been given freely: love, safety, belonging. You do not have to keep suffering in order to prove that what you felt was real. You do not have to keep holding on to what is hurting you just because you once believed it would save you. There is a moment in grief that changes everything. It is the moment you stop asking, "Why did this happen to me?" and begin asking, "What is this trying to teach me about myself?" Because maybe the pain is not only here to break your heart, maybe it is here to break the illusion that you have to lose yourself in order to be loved. Maybe it is here to show you that you cannot keep building your life around people, outcomes, and dreams that require you to abandon who you are. Most people are afraid of grief because they think it will destroy them, but grief does not destroy you. It removes what is false. It removes the fantasy, the denial, the version of reality you kept trying to force. And underneath all of that, something honest begins to appear. Something real. A quieter truth. The truth that some things were never meant to stay. Not because you were not enough. Not because you failed. But because your life was asking you to become someone new. And perhaps the hardest thing to accept is that not everything you lose is a punishment. Some losses are a form of guidance. Some endings are not the end of your life. They are the end of the life that was keeping you from yourself. And if you can begin to see that, then another question appears. What if life is not happening against you? You have spent so much of your life asking why. Why did this happen? Why did they leave? Why did things fall apart when you tried so hard to make them work? Why does it feel like life keeps taking from you the very things you wanted most? And because you could not find an answer, you began to create one. You told yourself that maybe you are the problem. Maybe you are too much, too emotional, too complicated, too sensitive, too difficult to love. The truth is, most people would rather believe there is something wrong with them than accept that life is sometimes beyond their control. Because if it is your fault, then maybe you can fix it. Maybe you can become better, quieter, easier, less needy, more lovable. Maybe then life will stop hurting you. But life does not ask you to become less of who you are. It asks you to become more honest. There is a reason why certain things in your life have not worked, no matter how much of yourself you gave to them. There is a reason why some doors closed, some people left, some plans collapsed, some versions of your future disappeared. Not everything that leaves your life is taking something from you. Some things are making room. Most people do not realize that they spend years trying to reopen doors that were never meant to stay open. They keep returning to the same people, the same patterns, the same hope that maybe this time things will be different. Not because their heart is weak, because they are afraid that if they stop chasing what they wanted, they will have to face the emptiness of not knowing what comes next. But sometimes the life you are trying so desperately to hold on to is the very thing standing between you and the life that is meant for you. The truth is, there are moments when life removes what your soul has outgrown, even when your mind is still attached to it, and that can feel cruel, because your mind only sees the loss, it sees the relationship ending, the dream collapsing, the certainty disappearing, but your soul sees something else. It sees the places where you were betraying yourself, the places where you were shrinking, waiting, settling, pretending, the places where you stayed too long because you confused suffering with love, or loyalty, or hope. There is a reason why what once felt right now feels unbearable. You are changing, you are becoming more aware, and awareness makes it impossible to keep living a life that no longer matches who you truly are. That is why you can no longer tolerate what you once accepted. That is why the things that used to distract you no longer work. That is why you feel this strange restlessness inside you, this sense that something in your life is no longer true. You are not falling apart, you are outgrowing, and growth rarely feels comfortable. Because every transformation begins with the death of something familiar, a familiar version of yourself, a familiar way of coping, a familiar story about who you are and what you deserve. Most people resist this moment. They keep trying to return to who they used to be because the unknown feels terrifying. But you cannot go back to the version of yourself that could survive by abandoning yourself. You have seen too much now. You have felt too much. You know deep down that there is no peace in pretending. The truth is, accepting life does not mean liking everything that happened. It does not mean pretending your pain does not matter. It means trusting that even what hurt you may have been guiding you. It means believing that not every closed door is rejection. Sometimes it is protection. Sometimes it is redirection. Sometimes life removes what is no longer aligned, even when you are still begging for it to stay. And perhaps one day, you will look back at the things that broke your heart and realize they were the very things that saved your life. Because they forced you to stop living for approval, to stop waiting for someone else to choose you, to stop building your identity around things that were never stable enough to hold it. There is something powerful that begins to happen when you stop asking life to be different. You begin to ask what it is trying to show you, and suddenly your pain is no longer just pain. It becomes a message, a mirror, a doorway. Because hidden inside every emotion you have been trying to escape, there is something important waiting to be understood. The hidden intelligence inside your pain. You have spent so much of your life trying not to feel, trying not to cry, not to overreact, not to be affected, not to let your emotions take over. You learned that pain was something to fix, hide, silence, or escape. So every time an emotion appeared, you treated it like an enemy. You distracted yourself. You stayed busy. You overthought. You shut down. You told yourself that if you could just stop feeling so much, everything would be easier. But the truth is, your emotions are not the problem. They are the language of the parts of you that have been ignored for too long. Most people do not realize that emotions are intelligent, not logical in the way the mind is logical, not neat, clear, or easy to understand, but intelligent in a deeper way. Because every emotion carries a message. Anxiety is not always telling you that something bad is going to happen. Sometimes it is telling you that you have been living too far away from yourself, that you have been saying yes when you mean no, that you have been trying to control everything because you no longer trust yourself to survive disappointment, that you have been staying in places, relationships, and patterns that require you to betray your own truth. There is a reason why your anxiety becomes louder when you ignore what you really feel. Because anxiety often appears when the soul is trying to protect you from a life that no longer fits. The truth is, anxiety is not always fear of the future. Sometimes it is grief for the self you have abandoned. And what about anger? You may have been taught that anger is dangerous, wrong, something to hide. But anger is not your enemy either. Anger is the part of you that knows when something is not right. It appears when a boundary has been crossed. When you have been giving too much, tolerating too much, shrinking too much. Anger is what rises when your soul becomes tired of being ignored. The problem is not that you feel anger. The problem is that you were taught to turn it against yourself. So instead of saying, "This hurts me, this is not okay, I deserve better," you stay silent. You blame yourself. You convince yourself that you are asking for too much. And slowly, all that unspoken anger turns into sadness, anxiety, exhaustion. There is a reason why you feel so tired. You have been carrying emotions that were never allowed to speak. And then there is loneliness. Not the loneliness of being physically alone. The deeper loneliness. The loneliness of feeling unseen. Of being surrounded by people who know your personality but not your truth. Who know the version of you that learned how to survive, but not the version of you that longs to be fully known. Most people do not realize that loneliness is not always the absence of connection. Sometimes it is the absence of connection with yourself. Because you can spend your entire life surrounded by people and still feel empty if you are living disconnected from who you really are. The truth is, every painful emotion is trying to bring you back to yourself, not punish you, not break you, guide you. Your sadness may be asking you to slow down and grieve what you never allowed yourself to grieve. Your anger may be asking you to stop abandoning yourself for people who do not know how to meet you. Your loneliness may be asking you to stop searching for outside validation and begin listening to the part of you that has been waiting quietly beneath all the noise. You do not need to fear your emotions, you need to become curious about them. Because the moment you stop asking, how do I make this feeling go away? And begin asking, what is this feeling trying to show me? Everything changes. Your pain becomes a doorway instead of a prison. Your emotions become guides instead of enemies. And somewhere beneath all the fear, all the noise, all the overthinking, you begin to sense something that has always been there. A quieter voice, a deeper truth. A part of you that does not panic, does not rush, does not beg to be chosen. A voice inside you that has been waiting for you to hear it. The voice inside you that is not fear. There is a voice inside you that has been speaking your entire life. But you have spent so long listening to fear that you no longer know the difference. Fear is loud. It rushes. It demands. It speaks in worst-case scenarios, endless questions and urgency that never seems to end. It tells you that you must decide now, fix this now, know the answer now. It tells you that if you slow down, if you stop thinking, if you stop preparing, something terrible will happen. Fear always sounds convincing because it speaks in the language of survival. And for a long time, survival was all you knew. So you trusted it. You trusted the voice that told you to stay where you were not happy because at least it was familiar. You trusted the voice that made you doubt yourself, shrink yourself, question your feelings, chase people who could not love you, hold on to what was hurting you because letting go felt more frightening than staying. Most people do not realize that fear does not always sound negative. Sometimes it sounds practical, responsible, logical. It says, do not trust yourself. Do not take the risk. Do not speak your truth. Do not leave. Do not change. Wait a little longer. Try a little harder. Become a little easier to love. And because fear repeats itself over and over, you begin to believe it is your true voice. But it is not. There is another voice beneath it, a quieter one, a voice that does not scream because it does not need to. It does not try to control. It does not create panic. It does not speak in endless circles. It simply knows. There is a reason why, even in the middle of your confusion, there have been moments when something deep inside you whispered the truth. The moment you knew that relationship was hurting you, even while you were still trying to save it. The moment you knew you were betraying yourself, even while you kept saying yes. The moment you knew you could not keep living the way you had been living, even if you had no idea what came next. That was not fear. That was you. The deepest part of you has always known. Known when something is not aligned. Known when you are pretending. Known when you are staying out of guilt, fear, loneliness, or hope. The problem is not that your intuition is absent. The problem is that fear is louder. Because fear has had years to practice. Years of telling you that you cannot trust yourself. Years of teaching you that your emotions are too much. Your instincts are wrong. Your truth is dangerous. So every time your inner voice tries to guide you, fear interrupts. Fear says, what if you are making a mistake? What if you regret it? What if no one understands? What if you lose everything? And because you are afraid, you return to what is familiar. Even when what is familiar is hurting you. The truth is, intuition rarely feels dramatic. It often feels quiet, simple, almost easy to miss. It is the feeling in your body when something is right, or when something is wrong. It is the exhaustion you feel when you are forcing yourself to stay where you no longer belong. It is the peace that appears when you stop lying to yourself. Most people do not realize that healing is not learning how to control your mind. It is learning how to stop letting fear be the loudest voice in the room. Because fear will always find a reason to keep you small, to keep you waiting, to keep you doubting. But the deeper part of you is not asking you to be fearless. It is asking you to be honest. Honest about what you feel. Honest about what you need. Honest about what you can no longer pretend not to know. There comes a moment when you begin to trust that voice more than your fear. And when that happens, your entire life begins to change. Because you stop asking, what do other people want from me? And begin asking, what is true for me? You stop shaping yourself around what keeps you accepted, and begin listening to what makes you feel alive. That is the moment you start returning to yourself. And when you return to yourself, you begin to understand something that changes everything. You were never too much. You were only taught to distrust the deepest parts of who you are. You were never too sensitive. You were taught to distrust yourself. You were not born believing that you were too much. You were taught. You learned it in the moments when your feelings were ignored, dismissed, laughed at, or treated like a problem. When you cried and someone told you that you were being dramatic. When you felt hurt and someone told you that you were too sensitive. When you needed comfort and someone told you to be stronger. Little by little, you began to believe that there was something wrong with the way you experienced the world. So you started hiding. You hid your emotions. You hid your needs. You hid the parts of yourself that felt deeply, loved deeply, noticed deeply. Because somewhere inside you, a painful belief began to form. If people see who I really am, they will not love me. The truth is, there is a reason why you have spent so much of your life doubting yourself. You were trained to trust other people's version of reality more than your own. You learned to question your instincts, to ignore your discomfort, to explain away what you felt. You sensed when something was wrong, but you told yourself you were imagining it. You knew when someone was hurting you, but you convinced yourself you were overreacting. You felt exhausted, disconnected, unseen, but you kept telling yourself that you should be grateful, that you should not complain, that maybe the problem was you. Most people do not realize how much damage happens when a person is taught to mistrust themselves. Because once you stop trusting yourself, you become vulnerable to everything. You stay too long in places that hurt you. You let people cross boundaries because you no longer believe you have the right to have them. You keep giving and giving, hoping that if you are kind enough, patient enough, understanding enough, someone will finally love you the way you need. But love cannot grow where self-betrayal lives. The truth is, your sensitivity was never the problem. Your sensitivity is the reason you notice what others miss. It is the reason you can feel when something is not real. It is the reason you long for depth, truth, connection, meaning. You do not want shallow conversations, empty relationships, lives built on pretending. You want something real. And because of that, you have often felt different. Different in a world that rewards numbness. Different in a world that teaches people to disconnect from themselves in order to survive. There is a reason why you have always felt out of place. Part of you has always known that you were not meant to live asleep. You were not meant to spend your life ignoring your intuition, silencing your emotions, settling for relationships that only touch the surface of who you are. But when you do not know how to hold your sensitivity, it becomes heavy. You absorb too much. You carry too much. You blame yourself for everything. You take responsibility for other people's emotions, moods, wounds, and choices because you think that if you care enough, you can save them. And while you are busy saving everyone else, no one is saving you. Not because you are unworthy, because you have been taught that your needs matter less, that your role is to understand, to forgive, to be there, to hold everything together. But who taught you that you had to disappear in order to be loved? Who taught you that being needed was the same thing as being valued? Who taught you that your worth depends on how much pain you can carry without breaking? The truth is, you do not need to become less sensitive in order to heal. You need to stop using your sensitivity against yourself. You need to stop turning your depth into self-blame. You need to stop apologizing for the very thing that makes you who you are. Because your sensitivity is not weakness. It is wisdom. It is the part of you that knows when something is not aligned. The part of you that feels the truth before the mind is ready to accept it. The part of you that refuses to settle for a life that is disconnected from your soul. You are not broken because you feel deeply. You are exhausted because you have spent your whole life trying to live as if you do not. And there comes a moment when you can no longer do that. A moment when you realize that the deepest pain was never that other people did not fully see you. It was that you learned not to see yourself. The day you stop abandoning yourself. There is a wound deeper than rejection, deeper than heartbreak, deeper than being misunderstood, left behind, or unloved. It is the wound of abandoning yourself. Because the truth is, There were many moments when life gave you signs, moments when something inside you knew. You knew when you were giving too much. You knew when you were staying in a place that was hurting you. You knew when you were saying yes while every part of you wanted to say no. But you ignored it. Not because you wanted to betray yourself, because you were afraid of what would happen if you did not. Afraid of disappointing people. Afraid of being alone. Afraid that if you stopped sacrificing yourself, no one would choose you. So you stayed. You stayed in relationships that asked you to shrink. You stayed in situations that made you feel invisible. You stayed loyal to people who only loved the version of you that made their life easier. And every time you stayed where your soul was asking you to leave, something inside you broke a little more. Most people do not realize this. They think their pain comes from what other people did to them. And yes, some people hurt you. Some people failed you. Some people gave you less than you deserved. But the deepest suffering often comes from the moments when you knew the truth and left yourself anyway. The moment you silenced your voice to keep the peace. The moment you accepted less because you were afraid to ask for more. The moment you ignored your intuition because you wanted to believe someone would become who they never showed you they were. There is a reason why you feel so exhausted. You have been carrying the weight of a life that is not true. A life built around being who other people need you to be. You became the helper, the one who understands, the one who waits, the one who gives another chance, the one who holds everything together while secretly falling apart. And perhaps no one ever asked what it was costing you. No one asked how much of yourself you had to lose in order to keep being loved. The truth is, you cannot heal while continuing to abandon yourself. You cannot build peace on top of self-betrayal. You cannot ask your heart to feel safe while you keep leading it back into places that hurt it. There comes a moment when you have to choose, not between yourself and other people, between yourself and the version of you that believes love must be earned through sacrifice, because that version of you will keep asking you to stay too long, give too much, forgive too quickly, and disappear a little more each time. But the deeper part of you is asking for something else. It is asking you to stop chasing people who do not know how to choose you, to stop begging for crumbs while calling it love, to stop betraying your truth just to avoid being alone. Because being alone is not the deepest loneliness. The deepest loneliness is being disconnected from yourself. And there is nothing more painful than spending your life standing beside everyone else while no one is standing beside you, including you. The day you stop abandoning yourself is not dramatic. It is quiet. It is the moment you tell the truth. The moment you admit that something is hurting you. The moment you stop making excuses for people who keep showing you who they are. The moment you stop asking, "What do I need to do to be enough?" and begin asking, "Why have I been living as if I am not?" That is the moment everything begins to change. Because for the first time, you stop waiting for someone else to save you. You stop searching outside yourself for permission to matter. You stop asking the world to give you what only you can give yourself: loyalty, protection, compassion, a place to belong. And when you begin to give those things to yourself, something extraordinary happens. You become the safe place you have been searching for your entire life. Becoming the safe place you were always searching for. For so long you believed that one day someone would arrive and make the pain disappear. Someone who would understand you completely. Choose you completely. Love you in the exact way you have always needed. You believed that when that happened, the emptiness would end. The fear would end. The loneliness would end. And because of that, you spent years searching. Searching in relationships, in approval, in being needed, in becoming whoever you thought you had to be in order to finally deserve the love you were missing. But the truth is, no one can give you what you have been taught to withhold from yourself. No one can make you feel safe if you keep abandoning your own feelings. No one can convince you that you are worthy if, deep down, you still believe you have to earn your place in this world. Most people do not realize that healing is not learning how to stop needing others. You will always need love, connection, understanding. You were never meant to do life alone. But there is a difference between wanting love and depending on it to tell you who you are. There is a reason why you have been so afraid of losing people. Because every time someone left, disappointed you, misunderstood you, it did not only hurt. It confirmed something you already feared. That you are not enough. That you are too much. That you are too difficult to love. But those beliefs were never the truth. They were wounds. And wounds have a way of making you build your life around protecting them. You become afraid to speak honestly because you are afraid people will leave. You become afraid to ask for what you need because you are afraid of being rejected. You become afraid to be yourself because you learn that love often came with conditions. The truth is, the part of you that keeps chasing, overgiving, overthinking, and settling is not weak. It is only trying to find the safety it never had. But safety was never meant to come from controlling other people. It was meant to come from learning that you will not leave yourself, that no matter what happens, no matter who stays or who goes, you will remain. You will listen to your own feelings instead of dismissing them. You will protect your own heart instead of handing it to people who do not know how to hold it. You will stop speaking to yourself in the cruel voice of the people who hurt you, and begin becoming the person you needed all along. There is something deeply healing that happens when you stop fighting your emotions, when you sit with your sadness without trying to escape it, when you let yourself cry without shame, when you place a hand on your own heart and say, "I understand why you are hurting." Most people have never experienced that kind of love. They have spent their entire lives being at war with themselves, judging their feelings, rejecting their needs, forcing themselves to be stronger, quieter, less emotional, less human. But healing begins when you stop treating yourself like a problem to solve and begin treating yourself like someone who deserves care. There is a reason why you have always longed for home. Not a place, a feeling. The feeling of being able to exhale. The feeling of not having to perform, pretend, prove, or hide. The feeling of being fully yourself and still being worthy of love. What if that feeling is not something you have to spend your whole life searching for? What if that feeling begins inside you? The moment you stop running from yourself. The moment you stop apologizing for your feelings. The moment you decide that even if the world does not always understand you, you will understand yourself. That is when something inside you softens. That is when the fear begins to loosen its grip. Because you no longer need other people to constantly reassure you that you matter. You begin to know it. You become the place inside yourself where your pain is allowed, your truth is welcome, and your heart is safe. And when you become that for yourself, you stop chasing life with desperation. You stop trying to control every outcome. Because you realize that even if life becomes uncertain again, you will not disappear. You will still have you. And that changes everything. The life that begins when you stop trying to control everything. There is a kind of freedom that most people never experience, not because it is impossible, because they spend their entire lives trying to control things that were never theirs. They try to control whether they are loved, whether they are understood, whether the future will go according to plan, whether people stay, whether life becomes easier, safer, more certain. And without realizing it, they build their entire existence around waiting for permission to feel at peace. Permission from the world, permission from other people, permission from circumstances they cannot control. But peace does not come that way. The truth is, the moment you stop trying to control everything is the moment your real life begins. Because for the first time, your energy returns to you. No longer wasted on chasing answers that do not exist. No longer spent replaying the past or rehearsing the future. No longer trapped in the exhausting cycle of trying to make life obey your fear. Most people do not realize how much of their life they lose to control. They lose years trying to force people to love them, years trying to become the right version of themselves, years waiting for certainty before allowing themselves to live. But certainty never comes. Life remains uncertain. People remain unpredictable. The future remains unknown. And yet, something inside you is different now, because you are no longer asking uncertainty to disappear. You are learning how to stand inside it without losing yourself. That is what real strength is, not becoming emotionless, not pretending you do not care, not building walls around your heart. Real strength is being able to care deeply without needing to control everything, to love without abandoning yourself, to hope without clinging, to trust that even if life changes, you will still be able to meet it. There is a reason why you have felt so trapped for so long. You believed your peace depended on what happened outside of you, but your peace has never lived there. It lives in the way you speak to yourself when life is hard. It lives in the choice to stop betraying your own truth. It lives in the quiet understanding that you cannot control what happens, but you can choose who you become through it. And when you begin to live from that place, life opens in a different way. You stop chasing people who do not choose you. You stop begging for clarity from those who only offer confusion. You stop waiting for a future version of yourself to finally deserve happiness. You begin to live now. You begin to say what you feel. You begin to trust what you know. You begin to walk away from what is no longer aligned, even when it hurts. Not because you no longer feel fear, because you no longer let fear decide who you are. The truth is, surrender is not weakness. Surrender is the moment you stop fighting reality and start working with it. It is the moment you stop demanding that life give you guarantees before you allow yourself to move forward. It is the moment you stop asking, "What if everything goes wrong?" and begin asking, "What becomes possible if I trust myself?" Because there is so much waiting for you on the other side of control. A quieter mind, a softer heart, a life that no longer feels like something you have to survive. You do not become someone else. You become more yourself, more honest, more grounded, more alive. And perhaps for the first time in your life, you begin to understand that you were never meant to spend your days fighting who you are. You were meant to become it. You were never broken. You were becoming. You have spent so much of your life believing that something was wrong with you. Wrong because you felt too much. Wrong because you cared too deeply. Wrong because you could not pretend, could not numb yourself, could not live on the surface the way other people seemed to. You looked at your sensitivity, your loneliness, your overthinking, your sadness, your need for something deeper, and you thought these were flaws. You thought they were the reason life felt so hard. But the truth is, they were never the problem. They were the signs. The signs that some part of you was refusing to settle for a life that was not true. There is a reason why you have always felt different, because you were never meant to become who the world expected you to be. You were never meant to silence your heart, ignore your intuition, betray your needs, and spend your life trying to earn the right to exist. You came into this world carrying a depth that many people will never understand, a sensitivity that notices what others miss, a soul that cannot be satisfied by what is shallow, false, or empty. And for a long time, that felt like a curse. Because when you do not know how to hold your own depth, it becomes painful. You begin to believe that if you were less emotional, less aware, less affected, life would be easier. Maybe it would, but it would not be your life. The truth is, your pain was never proof that you are broken. Your pain was the voice of the self you buried. The self that kept whispering, "This is not who you are." The self that knew you could not keep living for other people's approval. The self that became anxious every time you betrayed your truth. The self that became exhausted every time you abandoned yourself to keep someone else comfortable. Most people spend their whole lives running from that voice. They become who they are expected to be. They stay asleep. They survive. But you were never meant to survive. You were meant to wake up. And waking up is not easy. It means seeing clearly, seeing the patterns, the fear, the people you chased because you thought being chosen would make you worthy, the ways you disappeared inside relationships, expectations, and the need to be loved. It means grieving the person you had to become in order to survive. And then, slowly, choosing something different, choosing yourself. Not in a selfish way, in a truthful way. In the way that says, I will no longer abandon myself to keep the peace. I will no longer make myself smaller so other people can feel comfortable. I will no longer spend my life asking the world for permission to be who I am. Because your life does not begin when everyone finally understands you. Your life begins when you understand yourself. When you stop fighting your sensitivity and start seeing it as wisdom. When you stop seeing your loneliness as proof that you do not belong and begin seeing it as the pain of living too far away from yourself. When you stop trying to become like everyone else and start becoming who you truly are. That is the moment everything changes. Not because life suddenly becomes easy, but because you are no longer at war with yourself. You no longer need to control everything. You no longer need to earn your worth. You no longer need to keep carrying the impossible burden of becoming someone else. You are allowed to be exactly who you are. Deep, sensitive, different, real. And perhaps that is why you found these words today. Not because you are lost, but because some deeper part of you was always trying to find its way back home. To you.